Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses Live with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's Sunday, 22nd of May. I think I put the wrong date up on the post on Facebook this morning, but I'll correct that later. It's number 138 in the series. It's a fairly grey and miserable morning here in London. It's pretty damn cold for the time of year. Not really fantastic motorcycling weather, sadly, for all of us, but hey-ho, the spring must arrive sooner or later. So what have we got for you today? Well, we have a story from London blaming a rise in rider crash stats on home deliveries. A rider has died in Brazil after police threw something at him as he rode through a checkpoint. Norton, there's good news and there's some downright ugly news about the V4s. The DVSA are urging you to check your licenses as 2 million people are holding expired licenses. The Yamaha R7 has finally broken cover. We'll have a quick look at that today, and we'll talk about an accident that happened a couple of years back when overtaking a tractor. And I'll give you some we'll talk our way through that one. So we've got plenty to get on with. Don't forget, if you've got a comment, a question, any feedback on the show generally, anything you'd like me to cover in a future show, do get back to me and I'll do my best to fit it in, either today or at a later date. So we have, what do we have? We have Clive saying good morning. And Nigel is also here, and so's Tony. Good morning to you all, gents. That's nice to see you here. So, right, settle down for the next 25, 30 minutes or so, and we'll take you on with the rest of the show. So, all right, what can we start with then? Well, we'll start with the Transport for London story, actually. They've launched yet another safety initiative urging road users to look out for each other. This was launched on Friday, and it's amid concerns that the number of motorcyclists being killed or seriously injured on London's roads is not looking very good. Now, provisional data has just been released for 2020, and it suggests that 31 riders were killed last year in the capital, and that includes 12 where no other vehicle was involved, and the rider appears to have lost control of the machine, which is quite a scary number, really, isn't it? One pedestrian and a cyclist were also killed in collision with motorbike or scooter riders, and a grand total of 730 were seriously injured. So far this year, 2021, the figures are 2 riders died and 1 pedestrian killed in collision with a motorcyclist. Now, the 2020 total of 31 deaths was exactly the same as for 2019. Now, that's despite the reduction in road traffic over much of the year as a result of the pandemic and the various lockdowns that we went into. Now, TfL is arguing that this means that the risks of riding a powered two-wheeler must have increased in consequence. And their suggestion is that it's the rise in the number of motorbike and scooter riders out there making home deliveries, particularly for food, because it seems that numbers of those riders has soared during the pandemic. Certainly my sort of anecdotal evidence of my eyes, as it were, would suggest that there are more of these riders out and about, and they're certainly operating for longer hours as well. They're out all times during the day, whereas they used to be mostly in the evenings. In line with that, the number of registrations of low-powered scooters in London also increased, according to the Motorcycle Industry Association, up by around a third over the 2 years, 2019 to 2020. Although it has to be said that some of that may reflect a move away from public transport to commuter journeys as well. We have to bear that in mind. Nevertheless, Lily Matson, who's TfL's Chief Safety, Health and Environment Officer, said young men are tragically losing their lives in avoidable motorcycle collisions, which all too often also injure or kill people walking. We've seen a significant rise in motorcycle deliveries over the last year, and this cannot come at the expense of safety. This is why we're working closely with delivery, courier and servicing companies to address safety and protect the lives of riders and everyone else on the streets. The accident stats do, in fact, show that the vast majority of the casualties are male, although there are female riders out there. You do see them from time to time. Heidi Alexander, who's the Deputy Mayor for Transport, she said the huge rise in motorcycle deliveries in the past year mean that courier servicing and delivery companies have an important role to play in helping drive down these tragic incidents. Well, I would certainly agree with that. It's something I've talked about several times in the past, and I do think that the food delivery companies are skipping some responsibility when it comes to looking after their riders. Whether they will do anything about it without some legislation, who knows? I very much doubt it. TfL are working with safety videos and radio adverts, including working with a YouTube video producer called Ogmios. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but he's known for his School of Zen motoring videos. They're sort of chilled voiceovers to dashcam footage. I'll give you a link to the first one. If you haven't seen it, it is actually quite worth watching. He's quite entertaining to listen to. And frankly, a few of us could learn from his driving style too. It's definitely worth a watch. You probably didn't know, however, that the London initiative has coincided with what was the UN's 6th Global Road Safety Week. It's an event you probably missed, but it happened last week. But we probably should take some notice of it, as the event this year was focusing on streets for life. And these basically are low-speed streets, which are, they say, the heart of any community. And it's proposed that we have blanket 30 kph, 20 mile per hour speed limits on any roads where people and traffic mix, with the goal of making them healthy, green and livable, which all sounds wonderful. And I have no problem with doing that in a lot of residential areas, but I do suffer some skepticism when those restrictions are made blanket and cover major through roads too. Anyway, take a look at the video. I think you'll enjoy it. You can't have a carrot, of course, without a stick. And one of the things that was going on over the last 2 weeks was a Met Police crackdown on what they call rogue riders. And they made no less than 221 arrests for offences including drug and drink driving, disqualified driving. They issued 779 tickets for speeding, 292 for the rather scary offence of running red lights, 104 for mobile phone use, and they seized a total of 434 vehicles. That's a pretty worrying list of numbers, quite frankly. However, at least our police generally don't throw things at you. Over in Brazil, a 21-year-old motorcycle rider and a teenage boy were involved in an incident where a local military police officer threw something at their bike as they were riding through a police checkpoint in Sao Paulo. Last Sunday, the 21-year-old rider died in the crash and the teenage boy is in hospital. Vitor Gomez was apparently struck on the head by the object. Reports variously suggest he was either pronounced dead at the scene or was rushed to a hospital and died there. But his unnamed passenger was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The incident happened in response to a string of robberies in the area. The police manning the checkpoint had been alerted by radio that a motorcycle was heading their way with two males riding it without helmets, and they didn't obey instructions to stop, whereupon the events followed. It was caught on CCTV, and that video has gone public. And on Tuesday night, local residents took to the streets to protest against that police action and set fire to a bus. There were clashes with police, but no arrests or injuries were reported. The Public Security Secretariat has announced that the incident is being treated as manslaughter, so they are taking it pretty seriously. The police have been at least temporarily suspended, and they are being investigated by the Internal Affairs Department out there. It does make the UK police seem a little bit more user-friendly, as it were. So don't forget, Sue has, Mike said, working on L plates should be banned, and I'm thoroughly in agreement with you on that one, Mike. The Motorcycle Dispatch Association put an end to L plate working back in the 1980s. There's absolutely no excuse for the food industry to be exploiting L plate riders these days. Sue has also said good morning. Hi there, Sue. Nice to see you. Right. Okay. So don't forget, you can catch up with the show every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. You can find the previous issues here on Facebook, and you can also head over to my YouTube channel there, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK on the end, or you won't find me. All the old shows are over there, as are my 60-second safety videos and a number of other bits and pieces I've put together. So that's all over on YouTube there. What's next? Well, Norton. They never seem to be far from the news at the moment. Some of it is very good. So a year after acquiring Norton, TVS Motor, the Indian owners of the British company, have announced that their new factory in Solihull has actually begun the final production run of the Commando model. So that's bringing work to 110 people, which is good. And they also promise a grand opening for the factory in the near future. The interim's chief executive officer, a chap called John Russell, who was brought in to sort of smooth the path of restructuring under the new Indian ownership, he's stepping down and a new partnership is taking over. Dr. Robert Henschel, he's joining as CEO, whilst Vittorio Urciuli, excuse my Italian pronunciation there, he's taking on the chief technical officer role. Henschel was formerly managing director at a company called Valmet Automotive Holding. They're a Finnish automotive engineering and manufacturing company, and their clients have included Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, Ford and Saab, and his expertise apparently extends to electric vehicles, which gives you a hint about what we may see from Norton in the near future. Scioli has worked with Lotus, Ferrari and Aprilia in the past, so obviously experienced in the automotive industry. Meanwhile, as I say, the last run of Commandos is currently on the workbench, as it were. There's one of them out there. The company is also developing the Atlas 650 engine, and trial builds have started on the V4 model. Now, there are around 70 outstanding orders for the V4, and a further 80 are scheduled to be built, and that will bring the total number to 200, which was the old firm's plan. And the reason for that is that they can homologate them via something called single vehicle approval, which is basically for low run production. But Norton say that any future build of the V4 will go through the full Euro 5 homologation process. However, what's less good is the list of issues that the V4 flagship has experienced under the former regime. So there is a letter which you can see probably a little bit. I won't point out, I'll just zoom in a bit there, and you can see that what it actually says is that there is a current list of 35 defects, including 2 which are already known about, the oil line recall and the battery, and they consider 20 of them to be safety critical, which are likely to be referred to the DVSA, so that would presumably require a mandatory recall. 10 more that need checks because they could reveal further problems, and 5 are service intervals that can be completed whilst the bike's in for repair. So basically what they're saying there is that the bike needs to cease being ridden while they sort all that out. The bad news is that although the new owners are committed to supplying new machines that were ordered under the old regime, the letter also clearly states that owners who've taken on delivery of their bikes already, the new owners are not liable for repairs to be made to the Ghana built version of the Nortons. And so the owners of those bikes are being invited to make a claim against the liquidized assets of the old company. The bad news really there is that as I say, that list is a fairly comprehensive list of things that can go wrong. and sort of frame weld and fatigue resistance. That's all pretty grim, really. And it does make a bit of a mockery of Motorcycle News's assessment of the bike, that having, as they put it in one of their articles when they tested it some time ago, stunning build quality and attention to detail, they suggested that problems would be kept to a minimum. Well, they clearly didn't do that. Well, I don't know. You can't. What can I say? I'm not going to say anything. I'll probably just keep quiet on that. But anyway, what do we know? Well, we do know that Norton had very little in the way of funds in the final days to pay suppliers, many of whom stopped supplying anything other than cash on delivery. So I doubt quality control was top of their priority at that point. And on top of that, of course, there are the well-documented reports of riders turning up to collect their bikes which have been in for repair or service and finding that parts, including entire engines in one case I heard of, had been removed to complete other bikes which were overdue to delivery to a new customer. If you want to read more about this, I recommend the articles written for Superbike magazine. I'll just give you the link to it here. There we go. You should be able to see that in just a moment. Head over to Superbike, and that's gone up in the comment stream there. And the investigative journalist there, a chap called, I think, Hogan, his name is, has done some serious digging on those. Okay, so anything else to say about that? Well, not really. I'm sure this story will continue to run, but at least TVS do seem to be aware of these issues and doing something at least about helping riders who already have those machines sort them out. Right, okay, so licenses. You may well remember that during the coronavirus lockdown in March, the DVLA automatically extended licenses were up for renewal, and they gave any license that expired between 1st of February and December 31st an 11-month extension. The trouble is that many of the drivers and riders who would have had that extension are now overdue on updating them. Apparently, around 2 million photo cards are out of date, according to figures put out by the DVLA. And it's a very good idea if you have a quick check of your license and check the expiry date, just in case you have forgotten, because driving without a valid license comes with a £1,000 penalty. Don't forget, you also need to check the address is correct, and if you for some reason have changed your name, maybe you got married, that also is something that needs to be sorted out. And you do make those changes online if you want to, or by post, and they are free, so there's no reason not to get on with doing that. Right, okay, so new models. Well, one of the probably more eagerly awaited new models of recent days is this one here. It's the 2020 Yamaha R7. Now, leaked photos of this machine have been doing the rounds for several weeks, but the bike officially broke cover on Tuesday last week. A little bit too quickly for me to cover it on Wednesday. As expected, the R7 is powered by the Yamaha CP2 engine, which I assume stands for cross plane, which describes the crank arrangement. It's the same motor essentially that we saw in the MT-07 some years ago. Whilst in capacity terms it replaces the now defunct R6 four-cylinder, the performance of the parallel twin does fall pretty well short of the old super sport bike. However, as you can see with the full fairing, the design does mirror that of the old R6 and the current YZF R1. However, there's some interesting features that this bike has that the others don't. For starters, it's claimed to be the slimmest R model ever built, and they say it's actually narrower than the entry-level R125 or the R3, which is something of a feat, given that the R125 is actually a single cylinder. Now, that should help give it a bit of an aerodynamic advantage and make the most of the 73 horsepower, that's 54 kilowatt engine. No top speed figures are offered, which is fairly common from models these days, but I'd expect it to be able to hit around 125 to 130 from that kind of output. Okay, you may say it's all a bit academic, unless you're a track rider, in which case you're probably thinking it's not fast enough. But for the road rider, one of the good features is relatively low revs performance figures. Peak power comes in at 8750 revs, and the maximum torque of 67 Newton meters, which is pretty respectable, is at 6.5. And the bike has got a new ECU. It's got optimized air intake ducts. It comes with revised exhaust design and tweaked fuel injection settings. And that all offers, according to Yamaha, a torque-rich riding experience. And they say that the engine delivers fairly linear torque across a ride rev range. Now, for a road rider, that's actually bloody good, because basically what it means is it makes it a lot easier to ride on the road. Pretty much any revs that you'd care to open the throttle at, the bike will accelerate. Obviously, it accelerates harder when you get more revs on the engine, but the flat torque curve, it really smooths things out. My XJ6, a much derided motorcycle, has a very flat torque curve, and it's a doddle to ride. You can be in pretty much any gear, open the throttle, and it'll go. That's a complete contrast to the old R6, which was known to be spectacularly peaky. I didn't ride one of the later models, but I ride one of the early ones, and I've certainly ridden CBR 600s and Kawasaki ZX6Rs, and they basically they don't really do very much until the revs are up near the top of the rev range. So having a broad spread of torque makes for a good road bike, and it means it's far less reliant on being in precisely the right gear. Nevertheless, to ensure that the rider does get the sensation of some decent acceleration, Yamaha have slightly reduced the secondary gear ratio. Wheels are standard 17-inch, the 10-spoke cast alloy. They go with these fairly standard 120/70, 180/55 sizes, so you'll get plenty of tyre choice. You've got radially mounted brake calipers up front, 4 piston jobs. They're attached to a Brembo radial master cylinder. The calipers themselves are on fully adjustable KYB inverted forks. The MT-07, I believe that had a straight push shock. Basically, the shock is bolted to the swing arm at one end and the frame at the other. But the R7 gets a link type monocross rear suspension system, which should be a bit plusher over bumps. I'm not quite clear on what the electronic package comes with, but there are some conflicting reports about that. But it does seem that it should feature cornering ABS and traction control, as well as wheelie control. The clutch assist feature, which helps new riders who have dodgy clutch control, basically, and also a slipper clutch if you're a bit ham-fisted on the down changes, similar to a package basically as found on other bikes. And there is a quick shifter, but it's optional. You get 2 color options, sort of the dark blue you can see here and a Yamaha black, and you, oops, that's the wrong graphic. You also get an attractive price point. Now, the price hasn't actually been officially announced in Europe just yet, but the US price is reported to be $8,999, so $1 short of 9K. Given that we normally get a straight dollar to pound swap when a bike comes to Europe, you're going to be looking at probably around about £9,000, maybe a little bit less than that. Deliveries are expected from October 2021. So it's an attractive price point, and Yamaha clearly hope that the R7 can recapture significant numbers of sales and hopefully reignite the moribund sporty middleweight class. The R6, I have to say, along with its rivals from Honda and Kawasaki, had become increasingly focused on track use at the expense of rideability on the road. And Yamaha say the bike will make the R world a reality for many younger riders who yearn for the supersport lifestyle. So there we go. Let's hope for a bit of success from that particular model. Right, okay, so anything else to say? Don't forget, if you enjoy the show, you can pop over to my coffee page, Survival Skills over at Coffee, and if you support me over there, you also help me carry on with my writing, and you can open up over 400 better biking articles over there from the old Facebook files. So do do come over there, have a read. There's plenty to read. Some of it's free, some of it is for supporters and subscribers, but it's not going to cost you a lot of money. Price for coffee will get you a month's access. One of the things that I do talk about quite a lot is I try to look at riding from a very practical and pragmatic point of view. And unfortunately, my news feed is often full of accident reports. And whilst it's always sort of difficult to look at an accident and try to learn from it, you get accused of being an armchair expert. You weren't there, you didn't see what happened, you don't know. Which, they're fair comments. There are fair comments, but sometimes you get enough of a feel from a report to get at least a hint of what goes wrong when somebody has a crash. Now, a report that came out in the Leicester Mercury last week involved a rider, a chap called Howard Singer, and he says after his crash that he felt lucky to be alive. He flew through the air for 20 feet after colliding with a tractor on a country lane back in 2019. The 68-year-old suffered a fairly horrific range of injuries. He fractured his skull, he had a bleed on the brain, he dislocated his left hip and fractured the hip socket. He had multiple breaks of 8 ribs. He suffered a collapsed lung, a lacerated spleen, and a bruised aorta. And after that little lot, the cuts to his face and friction burns to both sides of his forehead seemed like fairly minor injuries. The brain injury alone led to a compulsory suspension of his driving license, although he was back on the motorcycle as soon he was past medically fit. So what went right in this crash? Well, basically, he was extremely lucky that one of the drivers on the scene immediately was actually an armed forces trained first aider, and she kept him awake until emergency services arrived. He was also lucky that the Derbyshire, Leicestershire and Rutland air ambulance was available, and it was scrambled to attend with a critical care crew, and they were actually the first medical resource at the scene. He was stabilized basically by that team and then taken to hospital via a land ambulance because they were so concerned at his condition that might have deteriorated on the move that he may have needed further treatment in the ambulance. And apparently that's something that can't be done in flight. So that's what went right. But what went wrong? Well, the report says that he was behind slow-moving traffic going through a village where there were parked cars at the side of the road due to an event being held at the local school. Now, on leaving the village, he found himself looking at a straight bit of road with good visibility, and he committed to overtaking the slow-moving traffic. But it seems that there was a tractor at the front of the queue, and that turned right straight in front of him. And what he said was, I had no time to stop and drove head on into the side of it. The police described it as a series of coincidences that collided to create an accident. Well, I kind of looked at that, and you probably know my thinking on crashes by now. Bad luck, rookie accident. The first thing to say is that his helmet actually came off in the impact. Now, that's surprisingly common. Helmets get baggy with time. They may be a very snug fit when they're new, but they do loosen up. The padding inside, particularly around the cheek area and around the sides of the head, softens up, and helmets do come a bit loose, and that makes them more likely to slip off. Too many riders ride with the chin strap too loose as well. I used to have regular arguments with new riders on that, on CBTs and DAS courses, who would complain that a tight chin strap was too uncomfortable. Well, unfortunately, that's one of the prices we pay for riding a motorcycle, is a snugly done up chin strap. Something that's less common on modern helmets, but used to be a real problem on older helmets, was that the points at which the chin strap was attached was too far forward, which meant it was fairly easy to just hook a thumb under the chin strap and pull it off over your chin. Unless you have a dandere chin, there is a problem with that. Putting the fastening points further back means that the chin strap is held in a much better position. But if you've got points at the front of the helmet, then test whether or not you can get a thumb under your chin strap, even when it's done up snugly, and pull it over your chin. If you have, it's time to put that helmet in the bin and go and buy another one. Simple as that. But it's not necessarily either the design of the helmet or the rider's fault for not securing it properly. One of the things that a few people seem to realize is that the bones in the human head are actually slightly flexible. Yes, obviously, if you whack your head hard enough, you will fracture your skull, but they do move, and on a really heavy impact, it is possible for the actual skull to deform enough to let even a good fitting helmet come off. So helmets are a very important part of our armory, literally, as motorcyclists, but they are not foolproof. So okay, the helmet is one thing, but what about his other decisions? Now, the thing is, as with any overtake, it's not an absolute must do. If the vehicle's not stationary, we don't absolutely have to overtake it. And we do have a choice about where and when we make the pass. We have a choice about what speed to use. And the thing I keep trying to get over to people on courses and when I do presentations on rider safety is that on a sort of bang for buck basis, overtaking is just about the riskiest maneuver we actually make on a motorcycle. But unfortunately, the way that we are taught to overtake, we're told that if we do it right, it's safe. Well, it isn't. Howard was no inexperienced rider. He's been riding since he was 17. He's a member of the IAM. He's completed what sounds like a bike safe course with Leicestershire Police. But the trouble is that much of this training, not necessarily by intent of the training providers, but certainly in the minds of the people who receive this training, is that they believe that because they've enhanced their skills and they are using those enhanced skills, they are now safer. The idea that gets into people's heads is that if we ride to a high enough standard, nothing will go wrong. Now, sadly, the crash stats suggest otherwise. Research analyses of advanced rider crashes don't seem to show any positive benefit, or at least not any significant benefit to post-test training. As a former instructor buddy of mine said, somebody associated with the BMF Blue Ribbon scheme many years ago, he said advanced riders tend to have more advanced accidents. So I make no apology once more for banging the drum about what is called insight training and the no surprise, no accident approach to riding. Go and look it up if you haven't already come across it. Insight training comes from the reverse direction. Instead of building skills and then letting the riders go ahead and use those skills, we start from the opposite angle. We start from the idea that being human, we make errors, and that everybody makes errors, no matter how much they know, how careful they are. And that's basically the approach that I've always taken with my survival skills training. That name wasn't chosen by accident. It literally, it came from my own experience as a motorcycle courier. So my focus with survival skills training is always to start riders understanding the 3 standard bike crashes at junctions, on corners, and overtaking. And what I try to do is work with trainees to develop a strategy to not only understand where, how, why, what happens when those errors occur, and who's likely to make the errors, whether it's us or another road user. But I also try to introduce strategies which allow us to stay out of trouble where we possibly can and get out of trouble when we can't avoid the error. So if we can, we want to avoid being sucked into a risky situation. And if we can't do that, then that's where the technical riding skill comes in, is to correct errors and get out of trouble. Avoidance where we can, in other words, evasion where we can't. It's a very pragmatic approach. Some people call it a very depressing approach to riding. But frankly, when you're not scaring yourself or being scared by others, riding does become a lot more enjoyable. So have a think about the tractor. What do we know about tractors? How far do they go down the road? Well, the usual answer to that is not very far. There are exceptions. You do occasionally see tractors driving long distances. Maybe they're being delivered to a farm, who knows? But generally speaking, if a tractor is working, if it's got a equipment attached to it, if it's towing a trailer, then it's probably not going very far at all. And basically that means that we need to treat any sort of gate into a field, any farm track leading up to farm buildings, any little lane which turns off a main road, it's likely to be where that tractor is intending to go. So it's easy in these kind of situations to blame the tractor driver for not looking properly, but again, think about the issues that tractors have, particularly if they have a load on the back. The mirror view isn't great on any long vehicle. If there's the slightest kink in the road, they're not likely to be able to see behind, because the tractors mirrors will be pointing in the wrong direction. And of course, if you are driving a tractor and you're trying to turn in through a narrow gateway, most of your attention is going to be on that gateway once you've actually checked behind and not seen anything. So, the idea that the tractor driver should be double checking every moment just in case there's a motorcycle overtaking is a little bit skewed against the tractor driver. It really is down to us as a motorcyclist to have a think about that and to be cautious when overtaking. Now, I can honestly say myself that I've had a couple of near misses in these circumstances myself in dim distant years. So I do look at overtaking anything like this in a very different way. I'm not looking at a slow-moving vehicle that's holding me up, but I'm looking at a slow-moving vehicle that could turn anywhere at any moment, and that basically fuels a lot of caution in my riding. I really do feel that we've got to stop looking at slower-moving vehicles as sort of overtaking fodder, as it were, and particularly when there's a queue involved, because if it wasn't the tractor that pulled out in front of Howard, it could have been one of the other drivers in the queue who'd seen the same straight bit of road that the motorcyclist had seen and gone for the overtake himself. Some years ago on Facebook, I featured a fatal crash in one of the video nasties, where that was exactly what happened. The driver saw the same opportunity that the rider had seen, and they both moved at exactly the same moment. So when the driver checked his mirror, the bike was behind him. When the collision took place, they were both in the offside lane. The driver should have checked his mirror again. Well, he's committed himself to the overtake. The only big difference was, of course, that the bike accelerated a lot faster than the car did. Unfortunately, the rider was thrown off the bike and straight into an oncoming camper van. So we have to treat any overtake, particularly ones past queues, with a lot of caution. Straight roads, good visibility. We look at those as easy places to overtake, but they're actually potential traps, because the relative simplicity of the overtake down a straight road with good visibility actually lures us into a false sense of security. Now, none of this is saying don't overtake, but overtake whilst holding in your mind all the things that can go wrong, and try to prepare for them, because then at least we've got a chance of taking evasive action. Howard said he had no time to stop. Well, think about what that means in terms of his speed into the overtake. We don't have to overtake at high speed. As long as we get past, it doesn't really matter how quickly we go. In fact, the slower we go, the better. Okay, it'll take longer straight to get past, but if that gives us a better chance of bailing out when things go wrong, we have to do that. Judgment is a balance question. All right, so as I said, it all sounds highly critical. One can only feel very, very sorry for somebody like Howard who's been involved in a collision like this, but we can all learn from other people going wrong. I think it's essential that we actually take other riders' experiences and inform our own future judgment on those experiences. Now, I will just finish by saying that on a simple count of numbers, overtaking is one of our rarer maneuvers. We go around far more bends, and we pass many, many more side turnings, driveways, and other entrances than we make overtakes. But in terms of crashes, it's one that's equally likely to kill you. And essentially what that means is it's far more likely to go wrong than cornering or driving through a junction, even though we tend to think of motorcycle crashes at junctions as being the one to watch out for. So overtaking really isn't a maneuver to undertake lightly. All right, okay, that's it for today. Before I sign off, don't forget, if you find the bell icon on your screen, you'll need to go full screen to see it on the PC. Apparently, you can click on that and subscribe to these videos on Facebook. Don't forget all those resources on YouTube, and also my Lulu page for my better biking books as well. And there's those channels, the YouTube channel there for the 60-second safety video. There was a new one out on Thursday. That's it for today. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching, and hopefully catch up with you at the next show, which is on Wednesday. So take care out there. Ride carefully. Bye for